Piano, please. Maestro. Some piano for lovely ears. Lovely pointy ears. And on we go. More rhythm. Can you imagine that? Chapter 49, I suppose. Should be it. It's getting weird with the inverted things. You get confusing. Hey, Death. Yo, yo. Let's see what Kitty does if she finds a job at a convent. So 49 now. Kitty found the work a refreshment to her spirit. She went to the convent every morning soon after sunrise, and did not return to the bungalow till the westerning sun flooded the narrow river and its crowded junks with gold. The Mother Superior gave into her case of smaller children. Kitty's mother had brought to London from her native Liverpool a practical sense of housewifery, and Kitty, notwithstanding her air of frivolity, had always had certain gifts to which she referred only in bantering tones. Thus, she could cook quite well, and she sewed beautifully. When she disclosed this talent, she was set to supervise the stitching and hemming of the younger girls. They knew a little French, and every day she picked up a few words of Chinese, so that it was not difficult for her to manage. At other times she had to see what the smallest children did, not to get into mischief. She had to dress and undress them, and take care that they rested when rest was needed. There were a good many babies, and these were in charge of Amax. But she was bidden to keep an eye out on them. None of the work was very important, and she would have liked to do something which was more arduous. But the Mother Superior paid no attention to her entreaties, and Kitty stood sufficiently in awe of her not to be inopportune. For the first few days she had to make something of an effort to overcome the faint distaste she felt for those little girls, in their ugly uniforms, with their stiff black hair, then round yellow faces, and their starting shoe-black eyes. But she remembered the soft look which had transfigured so beautifully the countenance of the Mother Superior when, on Kitty's first visit to the convent, she had stood surrounded by those ugly little things, and she would not allow herself to surrender to her instinct, and presently, taking in her arms one or the other of the tiny creatures, crying because of a fall or a cutting tooth, then Kitty found that a few soft words, though in a language the child did not understand, the pressure of her arms and the softness of her cheek against the weeping yellow face, could comfort and console. She began to lose all her feelings of strangeness. The small children, without any fear of her, came to her in their childish troubles, and it gave her a peculiar happiness to discern their confidence. It was the same with the older girls, to whom she taught sewing. Their bright, clever smiles and the pleasure she could give them by a word of praise touched her. She felt that they liked her, and, flattered and proud, she liked them in return. But there was one child that she could not grow used to. It was a little girl of 6. An idiot with a huge hydrocephalic head that swayed top-heavy on a small squat body. Large vacant eyes and a drooling mouth, the creature spoke hoarsely a few mumbled words. It was revolting and horrible, and for some reason it conceived an idiot attachment for Kitty, so that it followed her about as she changed her place from one part of the large room to another. It clung to her skirt and rubbed its face against her knees. It sought to fondle her hands. She shivered with disgust. She knew it yearned for careness, and she could not bring herself to touch it. Once, speaking to the Sister St. Joseph, she said that it was a pity it lived. Sister St. Joseph smiled and stretched out her hand to the misunderstood thing. It came and rubbed his bulging forehead against it. "Poor little mite," said the nun. "She was brought here positively dying. But the mercy of Providence, I was at the door just as she came. I thought there was not a moment to lose, so I baptized her at once. To God with you! You will not believe what trouble we've had to keep her with us. 3 or 4 times we all thought that her little soul would escape to heaven. To heaven with you! To Christ! I have baptized ye!" "Oh, richtig. With some St. Petery things. Thank ye. St. Peter's head. Whatever that is. Ah, a little... I think it's the Trovo dude with a Irish hat. St. Patrick. Like SpongeBob, not and Patrick, right? Okay. So it's not St. Peter, it's St. Patrick. Okay. It's a bit, we don't have St. Patrick here. Who's this Peter? We do have a Peter. Yep. And the roses. Thank you. Who's this Peter fellow? We do have this Peter. We call him Petru. Yep. Definitely not the same guy. Not a drinky drinker. Where were we? Ah, yes. The little soul would escape to heaven. Kitty was silent. Sister St. Joseph, in her ludicrous way, began to gossip of other things. The next day, when the idiot child came to her and touched her hand, Kitty nerved herself to place it in a caress of the great bare skull. She forced her lips into a smile. But suddenly the child, with an evil perversity, left her. It seemed to lose interest in her, and that day and the following days paid her no attention. Kitty did not know what she had done and tried to lure it back to her with smiles and gestures, but it turned away and pretended not to see her. Peter Cotton Tail. I'm sure Mr. Patrick there wasn't drunk. It was probably, I would assume, the guy that ended up teaching them Christianity or something, the Irish. Pretty sure one of the last places of Europe, right, that wasn't yet reached by Christianity, with their druids and stuff. Chapter 50. Since the nuns were busy from morning till night with 100 duties, Kitty saw little of them but at the services in the bare, humble chapel. On her first day, the Mother Superior, catching sight of her seated at the back behind the girls of the benches according to their ages, stopped and spoke to her. "You must not think it necessary for you to come to the chapel when we do," she said. "You are a Protestant, and you will go to hell for your convictions." "But I like to come, Mother. I find that it arrests me." The Mother Superior gave her a moment's glance and slightly inclined her grave head. "Of course, you will do exactly as you choose. I merely wanted you to understand that you are under no obligation." But with Mother Sister St. Joseph, Kitty soon became on terms, not of intimacy perhaps, but of familiarity. The economy of the convent was in her charge, and to look after the material well-being of that big family kept the sister on her feet all day. She said that the only time she had to rest was that which she devoted to prayer, but it pleased her towards the evening, when Kitty was with the girls at their work, to come in and, vowing that she was tired out and had not a moment to spare, sit down for a few minutes and gossip. That's probably a sin, gossiping. When she was not in the presence of the Mother Superior, she was a talkative, merry creature, fond of a joke, and she did not dislike a bit of a scandal. Kitty stood in no fear of her. Her habit did not prevent Sister St. Joseph from being a good-natured, homely woman, and she chatted with her gaily. She did not mind with her showing how badly she talked French, and they laughed with one another over Kitty's mistakes. The sister taught her every day a few useful words of Chinese. She was a farmer's daughter, and at heart she was still a peasant. "I used to keep the cows when I was little," she said, "like St. Joan of Arc. Oh my God, Saint Joan of Arc, where are my damn lines, mystic? But I was too wicked to have visions. It was fortunate, I think, for my father would certainly have whipped me if I had. She used often to whip me, the good old man, for I was a very naughty little girl. I'm ashamed sometimes when I think now of the pranks I used to play. Kitty laughed at the thought that this corpulent, middle-aged nun could ever have been a wayward child, and yet there was something childlike in her still, so that your heart went out to her. She seemed to have about her an aroma of the countryside in autumn, when the apple trees are laden with fruit and the crops are in and safely housed. She had not the tragic and austere saintliness of the Mother Superior, but a gaiety that was simple and happy. "Do you ever wish to go home again, ma sœur?" asked Kitty. "Oh, no. It would be too hard to come back. I love to be here, and I am never so happy as when I am amongst the orphans. They're so good, they're so graceful. But it is all very well to be a nun. Un peu and très religieuse. Still, one has a mother, and one cannot forget that one drank the milk of her breasts. She is old, my mother, and it is hard never to see her again. But when she is fond of her daughter-in-law, and my brother is good to her. His son is growing up now. I should think they'd be glad of an extra pair of strong arms on the farm. She was only a child when I left France, but he promised to have a fist that you could fell on an ox with." Ah, okay. That seemed weird. He promised to have a fist that could fell an ox with. It was almost impossible in that quiet room listening to the nun to realize that on the other side of these four walls cholera was raging. Sister St. Joseph had an unconcern which conveyed itself to Kitty. She had a naive curiosity about the world and its inhabitants. She asked Kitty all kinds of questions about London and England, a country, she thought, where so thick was the fog that you could not see your hand at midday, and she wanted to know if Kitty went to balls and whether she lived in a grand house, and how many brothers and sisters she had. She spoke often of Walter. The Mother Superior said he was wonderful, and every day they prayed for him. How luckily Kitty was to have a husband who was so good and so brave and so clever. Chapter 51. But sooner or later, Sister St. Joseph returned to the subject of the Mother Superior. Kitty had been conscious from the beginning that the personality of this woman dominated the convent. She was regarded by all that dwelt there with love, certainly, and with admiration, but also with awe and not a little dread. Notwithstanding her kindness, Kitty herself felt like a schoolgirl in her presence. She was never quite at her ease with her, for she was filled with a sentiment which was so strange that it embarrassed her. Reverence. Sister St. Joseph, with an ingenious desire to impress, told Kitty how great the family was to which the Mother Superior belonged. She had amongst her ancestors persons of historic importance, and she was in percousine with half the kings of Europe. Alfonso of Spain, who hunted at her father's, and they had chateaux all over France. It must have been hard to live so much grandeur. Kitty listened slightly, but not a little impressed. Du reste, you have only to look at her, said the sister, to see that comme famille, c'est le du panier. She has the most beautiful hands that I have ever seen, said Kitty. Ah, but if you only knew how she used them. She's not afraid of work. Notre bonne mère. When they had come to this city, there had been nothing. They had built the convent. The Mother Superior had made the plans and supervised the work. The moment they arrived, they began to save the poor little unwanted girls from the baby tower and the cruel hands of the midwife. At first they had no beds to sleep in, and no glass to keep out the night air. And there was nothing, said Mother St. Joseph, which is more unwholesome. And often they had no money left, not only to pay the builders, but even to buy their simple fare. They lived like peasants. What was she saying? The peasants in France? Tenez. The men who worked for her father would have thrown to the pigs the food they ate. And when the Mother Superior would collect her daughters round her, they would kneel and pray. The Blessed Virgin would send money. Nice of her. 1,000 francs would arrive by post the next day, or a stranger, an Englishman, a Protestant if you please, or even a Chinaman would knock at the door while they were actually on their knees and bring them a present. Once they were in such straits that they all made a vow to the Blessed Virgin that they would recite a Nouveau-Laine in her honor if she succored them? Succored them, I guess. Let's listen to that one.
Sucker.
Suckered.
To give assistance or aid. It sounds a bit like suckered, but it's suckered. I guess it's completely the same. If she suckered them, sucker. And would you believe it? That funny Mr. Waddington came to see us next day and saying that we looked as though we all wanted a good plate of roast beef, gave us $100. What a comic little man he was, with his bald head and his little shrewd eyes. C'est petit au malin. And his jokes. Mon Dieu, how he murdered the French language, and yet you could not help laughing at it. He was always in a good humor. Although this terrible epidemic, he carried himself as if he were enjoying a holiday. He had a heart quite French, and a wit so that you would hardly believe he was English, except for his accent. But sometimes Sister St. Joseph thought he spoke badly on purpose to make you laugh. Of course, his morals were not all one could wish, but still, that was his business. With a sigh, a shrug, and a shake of the head. And he was a bachelor, and a young man. What is wrong with his morals, ma sœur? Asked Kitty, smiling. Is it possible that you do not know? It is a sin for me to tell you. I have no business to say such things. He lives with a Chinese woman. That is to say, not a Chinese woman, but a Manchu. A princess, it appears, and she loves him to distraction. That sounds quite impossible, cried Kitty. No, no, I promise you. It is everything that is most true. It is very wicked of him. Those things are not done. Did you not hear when you first came to the convent that he would not eat the madeleines that I had made expressly, that Notre Bonne Mère said his stomach was deranged by Manchu cooking? That was what she meant, and you should have seen the head that he made. It is a story altogether curious. It appears that he was stationed at Han-o during the revolution when they were massacring the Manchus, and this good little Waddington saved the lives of one of their great families. They are related to the imperial family. Oh, Jesus, that's not going to end well. The girl fell violently in love with him. Violently in love. And well, the rest you can imagine. And when, then, he left Hong Kong, she ran away and followed him, and now she follows him everywhere. And he has had to resign himself to keep her, poor fellow, and I dare say he is very fond of her. They are quite charming sometimes, these Manchu women. But what am I thinking of? I have 1,000 things to do, and I sit here. I am a bad religious. I am ashamed of myself. A bad religious. Let us go to the next one. Chapterino 52. Kitty had a queer feeling that she was growing. The constant occupation distracted her mind, and the glimpses she had of other lives and other outlooks awakened her imagination. Short chapters. Yep. She began to regain her spirits. She felt better and stronger. It had seemed to her that she could do nothing but weep. But to her surprise, and not a little to her confusion, she caught herself laughing at this and that. It began so quite natural to live in the midst of a dangerous epidemic. She knew that people were dying to the left and to the right of her, but she ceased very much to think of it. The Mother Superior had forbidden her to go into the infirmaries, and closed door excited her curiosity. She would have liked to peep in, and could not do so without being seen, and she did not know what punishment the Mother Superior would inflict upon her. It would be dreadful to be sent away. She was devoted to the children now, and they would miss her if she went. In fact, she did not know what they would do without her. On one day it occupied her that she had neither thought of Charles Townsend nor dreamt of him for a week. Her heart gave a sudden thud against her ribs. She was cured. She could think of him now with indifference. She loved him no longer. Oh, the relief and the sense of liberation! It was strange to look back and remember how passionately she had yearned for him. She thought she would die when he failed her. She thought her life henceforth had nothing to offer but misery. And now already she was laughing. A worthless creature. What a fool she had made her herself. And now, considering him calmly, she wondered what on earth she had seen in him. It was lucky that Waddington knew nothing. She could never have endured his malicious eyeing and his ironical innuendos. She was free at last, free! The land of the free. She could hardly prevent herself from laughing aloud. The children were playing some romping game, and it was her habit to look on with an indulgent smile. restraining them when they made too much noise, and taking care that in their boisterousness none was hurt. But now, in her high spirits, feeling as young as any of them, she joined the game. That boat there is probably a ferry. Right? Little ferry boat. The little girls received her with delight. They chased up and down the room, shouting at the top of their shrill voices, with fantastic and almost barbarous glee. They grew so excited that they leaped into the air with joy. The noise was terrific. Suddenly the door opened and the Mother Superior stood on the threshold. Kitty, abashed, extricated herself from the clutches of a dozen little girls who, with wild shrieks, had seized her. "Is this how you keep these children good and quiet?" asked the Mother Superior, and a smile on her lips. "We were having a game, Mother. They got excited. It's my fault. I led them on." The Mother Superior came forward, and as usual the children clustered around her. She put her hands around the narrow shoulders and playfully pulled their little yellow ears. She looked at Kitty with a long, soft look. Kitty was flushed, and she was breathing quickly. Her liquid eyes were shining, and her lovely hair, disarranged in all the shrugging and the laughter, was in an adorable confusion. "Que vous êtes belle, ma chère enfant," said the Mother Superior. "It does the heart good to look at you. No wonder these children adore you." Tiny boat. Teeny tiny. It's about 2 centimeters on screen there. Now the tiny boat behind it. It's even tinier. 1 centimeter. Kitty blushed deeply, and she knew not why. Tears suddenly filled her eyes. She covered her face with her hands. "Oh, Mother, you make me ashamed. Come, don't be silly. Beauty is also a gift of God, one of the most beautiful and precious, and we should be thankful if we are happy enough to possess it, and thankful, if we are not, that others possess it for our pleasure." She smiled again, and as though Kitty were a child, too gently patted her soft cheek. I wonder if I could do a collaboration with a duck guy. That would be funny. Need to make a duck farm, man. Duck living. We have to do with our little cameras across the seas and stuff. 53. Since she had been working at the convent, Kitty had seen less of Waddington. 2 or 3 times he had come down to the river bank to meet her, and they had walked up the hill together. He came in to drink a whisky and soda, but he would seldom stay for dinner. One Sunday, however, he suggested that they should take their luncheon with them and go in chairs to a Buddhist monastery. It was situated 10 miles from the city, and had some reputation as a place of pilgrimage. The Mother Superior, insisting that Kitty must have a day's rest, would not let her work on Sundays, and Walter, of course, was as busy then as usual. They started early in order to arrive before the heat of the day, and were carried along a narrow causeway between the rice fields. Now and then they passed comfortable farmhouses, nestling with friendly intimacy in a grove of bamboos. Kitty enjoyed the idleness. It was pleasant, after being cooped up in the city, to see about her the wide country. They came to the monastery, struggling low buildings by the side of the river, agreeably shaded by trees, and were led by the smiling monks through the courtyard. Empty, with a solemn emptiness, and shone buildings with temples with grimacing gods. In the sanctuary sat Buddha, remote and sad, wistful, abstracted, and faintly smiling. There was about everything a sense of dejection. The magnificence was shoddy and ruined. The gods were dusty, and the faith that had made them was dying. The monks seemed to stay on suffrage, as though they awaited a notice to quit, and in the smile of the abbot, with his beautiful politeness, was of irony of resignation. One of these days the monks would wander away from the shady pleasant wood, and the buildings, crumbling and neglected, would be battered by fierce storms and besieged by the surrounding nature. Wild creepers would twine together about the dead images, and trees would grow in courtyards. Then the gods would dwell there no longer, but evil spirits of darkness. Another chapter gone. "54. They sat on the steps of a little building, 4 lacquered columns of a high, turreted roof, under which stood a great bronze bell, and watched the river flow sluggish and with many a bend towards the stricken city. They could see its crenellated walls. The heat hung over it like a pall, but the river, though it flowed so slowly, had still a sense of movement, and it gave one a melancholy feeling of the transitoriness of things. Everything passed, and what trace of its passage remained? It seemed to Kitty that they all were the human race, like the drops of water in the river, and they flowed on, each so close to the other, and yet so far apart, a nameless flood to the sea. When all things lasted so short a time and nothing mattered very much, it seemed pitiful that man, attracting an absurd importance to trivial objects, should make themselves and one another so unhappy. "Do you know Harrington Gardens?" she asked Waddington, with a smile in her beautiful eyes. "No. Why?" "Nothing, only it's a long way from here. It's where my people live." "Are you thinking of going home?" "No. I suppose you'll be leaving here in a couple of months. The epidemic seems to be abating, and the cool weather seems to see to the end of it. I almost think I shall be sorry to go." For a moment she thought of the future. She did not know what plans Walter had in mind. He told her nothing. He was cool, polite, silent, and inscrutable. Cool cucumber. 2 little drops in that river that flowed silently towards the unknown. 2 little drops that to themselves had so much individuality, and to the onlooker were but an indistinguishable part of the water. "Take care the nuns don't start converting you," said Waddington, with his malicious little smile. "They are much too busy, nor do they care. They are wonderful and so kind, and yet I hardly know how to explain it. There is a wall between them and me. I don't know what it is. It is as though they possess a secret which made all the difference in their lives, and which I am so unworthy to share. It is not faith. It is something deeper, more significant. They walk in a different world from ours, and we shall always be strangers to them. Each day, when the convent door closes behind me, I feel that for them I have ceased to exist. I can understand that it is something of a blow to your vanity. He returned mockingly. My vanity? Kitty shrugged her shoulders. Then, smiling once more, she turned to him lazily. Why did you never tell me that you lived with a Manchu princess? Why didn't you tell me? What have those gossiping old women have been telling you? I am sure that it is a sin for nuns to discuss the private affairs of the customs officials. Why should you be so sensitive? Waddington gazed down sideways, so that it gave him an air of shyness. He faintly shrugged his shoulders. It is not a thing to advertise. I do not know that I would greatly add to my chances of a promotion in the service. Are you very fond of her? He looked up now, and his ugly little face had the look of a naughty schoolboy. She's abandoned everything for my sake. Home, family, security, self-respect. It's a good many years now since she threw everything to the winds to be with me. I've sent her away 2 or 3 times, but she's always come back. I've run away from her myself, but she's always followed me. And now I've given it up as a bad job. I think I've got to put up with her for the rest of my life. She must really love you to distraction. It is rather a funny sensation, you know, he answered, wrinkling a perplexed forehead. I haven't the slightest doubt that if I really left her, definitely, she would commit suicide. Not for any ill feeling towards me, but quite naturally because she was unwilling to live without me. It is a curious feeling. It gives one to know that I cannot help meaning something to you. But it is loving that's the important thing, not being loved. One's not even grateful to the people who love one. If one doesn't love them, they only bore one. I have no experience of the plural, he replied. Mine is only in the singular. Is she really an imperial princess? No, that is a romantic exaggeration of the nuns. She belongs to one of the great families of Manchus, but they have, of course, been ruined by the revolution. She is, all the same, a great lady. So they are in that turbulent times after the Manchus fell from power and before the communists came, when they had warlords and stuff. That's the time period. He said it with a tone of pride, so that a smile flickered in Kitty's eyes. Are you going to stay here for the rest of your life then? In China? Yes. What would she do elsewhere? When I retire, I shall take a little Chinese house in Peking and spend the rest of my days there. I don't think so, dude. I don't think so. But he would probably be able to return to Hong Kong. That is going to be English for quite a long time. Up until 1997, I think. Have you any children? No. She looked at him curiously. It was strange that this little bald-headed man with his monkey face should have aroused in the alien woman so devastating a passion. She could not tell why the way he spoke of her, notwithstanding his casual manner and his flippant phrases, gave her the impression so strongly of the woman's intense and unique devotion. It troubled her a little. It does seem a long way to Harrington Gardens, she smiled. Why do you say that? I don't understand anything. Life is so strange. I feel like someone who is living all his life by a duck pond and suddenly is showing the sea. It makes me a little breathless, and yet it fills me with elevation. I don't know. I don't want to die. I want to live. I'm beginning to feel a little new courage. I feel like one of those old sailors who set sail for undiscovered seas, and I think my soul hankers for the unknown. Waddington looked at her reflectively. Her abstracted gaze rested on the smoothness of the river, two little drops that flowed silently towards the dark, eternal sea. May I come and see the Manchu lady? Asked Kitty, suddenly raising her head. She cannot speak a word of English. You've been very kind to me. You've done a great deal for me. Perhaps I could show her my manner, that I had a friendly feeling towards her. Waddington gave a thin, mocking little smile, but he answered with good humor, I will come and fetch you one day, and she shall give you a cup of jasmine tea. She would not tell him that this story of an alien love had for the first moment strangely intrigued her fancy, and the Manchu princess stood now as a symbol of something that vaguely but insistently beckoned to her. She pointed enigmatically to a mystic land of the spirit. "55, 55, yes." But a day or two later, Kitty made an unforeseen discovery. She went to the convent as usual and set about her first work of seeing that the children were washed and dressed. Since the nuns held firmly that the night air was harmful, the atmosphere in the dormitory was close and fetid. After the freshness of the morning, it always made Kitty a little uncomfortable as she hastened to open such windows as would. But today she felt on a sudden despairing sick, and with her head swimming she stood at a window trying to compose herself. It had never been as bad as this before, when nausea overwhelmed her and she vomited. She gave a cry so that the children were frightened, and the other girl who was helping her ran up, seeing Kitty white and trembling, stopped short of an exclamation. Cholera! The thought flashed through Kitty's mind, and then a death-like feeling came over her. She was seized with a terror. She shrugged for a moment against the night that seemed agonizingly to run through her veins. She felt horribly ill. Then darkness. When she opened her eyes, she did not know at first how or where she was. She seemed to be lying on the floor, and moving her head slightly, she thought that there was a pillow under it. She could not remember. The Mother Superior was kneeling by her side, holding smelling salts to her nose. I wonder what that smells like. I've heard so much of these smelling salts things. Sister St. Joseph stood looking at her. Give her some brandy. That's the English way. Brandy. Then it came back. Cholera. She saw the consternation of the nuns' faces. Sister St. Joseph looked huge at her outline, but her outline was blurred. Once more, terror overwhelmed her. "Oh, mother, mother," she sobbed. "Am I going to die? I don't want to die." "Of course you're not going to die," said Mother Superior. She was quite composed, and there was even amusement in her eyes. "But it's cholera. Where's Walter? Has he been sent for? Oh, mother, mother, mother!" She burst into a flood of tears. The Mother Superior gave her hand, and Kitty seized it as though it were a hold upon the life she feared to lose. "Come, come, my dear child, you mustn't be so silly. It's not cholera, or anything of the kind. Where is Walter? Your husband is much too busy to be troubled. In 5 minutes you'll be perfectly well." Kitty looked at her with starting, harassed eyes. Why did she take it so calmly? It was cruel. "Keep perfectly quiet for a minute," said the Mother Superior. "There is nothing to alarm yourself about." Kitty felt her heart beat madly. She had grown so used to the thought of cholera that it had ceased to seem possible that she could catch it. Oh, the fool she had been! She knew she was going to die. She was frightened. The girls brought a long rattan chair and placed it by the window. "Come, let us lift you," said Mother Superior. "You will be more comfortable in the chaise longue." "Ah, so that's where that one comes, chaise longue. We have that word in Romanian, but it's phonetic." Interesting. It's a French word. "Do you think you can stand?" She put her hands under Kitty's arms, and Sister St. Joseph helped her to her feet. She sank exhausted into the chair. "I had better shut the window," said Sister St. Joseph. "The early morning air cannot be good for her." "No, no," said Kitty. "Please leave it open." It gave her confidence to see the blue sky. She was shaken, but certainly she began to feel better. The two nuns looked at her for a moment in silence, and Sister St. Joseph said something to the Mother Superior which she could not understand. Then the Mother Superior sat on one side of the chair and took her hand. "Listen, ma chère enfant." She asked her once or two questions. Kitty answered them without knowing what they meant. Her lips were trembling so that she could hardly frame the words. "There is no doubt about it," said Sister St. Joseph. "I am not one to be deceived in such a matter." She gave a little laugh in which Kitty seemed to discern a little excitement and not a little affection. The Mother Superior, still holding Kitty's hand, smiled with soft tenderness. "Sister St. Joseph has more experience of these things than I have, my dear child. She said at once there was the matter with you. She was evidently quite right." "What do you mean?" asked Kitty anxiously. "Oh, she's pregnant. Come on. Say it faster. Jesus. 2 pages of mingling about. It is quite evident. But the possibility of such thing did not occur to you. You are with child, my dear." "Yeah. You already said that before as well, when she looked pale." The start that Kitty gave shook her head to foot, and she had her feet to the ground as though to spring up. Lie still," said the Mother Superior. Kitty felt herself blush furiously. Furious blushing. She put her hands to her breasts. "It's impossible. It is not true." Qu'est-ce que c'est que dit? Qu'est-ce que c'est dit? Asked my Sister St. Joseph. The Mother Superior translated. Sister St. Joseph, broad smile, with a red cheek, was beaming. "No mistake is possible. I give you my word of honor." "How long have you been married, my child?" asked the Mother Superior. "Why, when my sister-in-law had been married as long as you, she had already 2 babies. Kitty sank back into the chair. She was death in her heart. There was death in her heart. I am so ashamed, she whispered. Because you're going to have a baby? Why? What can be more natural? Quel joli pour le docteur, said Sister St. Joseph. Yes, think of what happiness for your husband. He will be overjoyed. You have only to see him with babies, the look on his face when he plays with them, to see how enchanted he will be to have one of his own. For a little while Kitty was silent. The 2 nuns looked at her with tender interest, and the Mother Superior stroked her hand. It was silly of me not to have suspected it before, said Kitty. At all events, I am glad it's not cholera. I feel very much better. I will get back to my work. Not today, my dear child. You have had a shock. You had be much better go home and rest yourself. No, I much rather stay and work. I insist. What would our good doctor say if I let you be so imprudent? Come tomorrow if you like, or the day after. But today you must be quiet. I will send for a chair. That's like the taxi here. A chair. 2 dudes with legs. I guess these guys also had a rickshaw and stuff. Would you like me to let one of your young girls go with you? No, I shall be all right alone. Chapterino 56. Kitty was lying on her bed and the shutters were closed. It was after luncheon and the servants slept. What she had learned that morning, and now she was certain that it was true, filled her heart with consternation. Ever since she came home she had been trying to think, but her mind was a blank, and she could not collect her thoughts. Suddenly she heard a step. The feet were bolted so that it could not be one of the boys. With a gasp of apprehension she realized that it could only be her husband. He was in the sitting room, and she heard herself called. She did not reply. There was a moment's silence, and then a knock at her door. Yes? May I come in? Ooh, things are getting spicy. Kitty rose from her bed and slipped into a dressing gown. Yes? He entered. She was glad that the closed shutters shadowed her face. I hope I did not wake you. I knocked very, very gently. I hadn't been asleep. He went to one of the windows and threw open the shutter. A flood of warm light streamed into the room. What is it? She asked. Why are you back so early? The sisters said that you weren't very well. I thought I had better come and see what was the matter. A flash of anger passed through her. What would you have said if it had been cholera? If it had been, you certainly couldn't have made your way home this morning. She went to the dressing table and passed the comb through her shrinkled hair. She wanted to gain time. Then, sitting down, she lit a cigarette. Not good for the baby. I wasn't very well this morning, and the Mother Superior thought I'd better come back here. But I'm perfectly all right again. Shall go to the convent as usual tomorrow. What was the matter with you? They didn't tell you? No. Mother Superior said that you must tell me yourself. He did now what he did seldom. He looked her full in the face. His professional instincts were stronger than his personal. She hesitated. Then she forced herself to meet his eyes. "I'm going to have a baby," she said. She was accustomed to his habit of meeting with silence a statement which you would naturally expect to evoke an exclamation. But never had it seemed to her more devastating. He said nothing. He made no gesture, no movement of his face, nor change of expression in his dark eyes indicated that he had heard. She felt suddenly inclined to cry. If a man loved his wife, and his wife loved him, at such a moment they were drawn together by a poignant emotion. The silence was intolerable, and she broke it. Well, to be fair, it might not be his, so, you know. You know what I mean? I don't know why I never... I don't know. I don't know why it never occurred to me before. It was stupid of me, but... That with one thing and another. How long have you... When do you expect to be confined? The words seemed to issue from his lips with difficulty. She felt that his throat was dry as hers. It was a nuisance that her lips trembled so when she spoke. If she was not of stone, it must excite his pity. I don't know, Yeah, I know. I don't know either. I suppose it's been like this between us 2 or 3 months. Am I the father? She gave a little gasp. There was a shadow of a tremor in his voice. It was dreadful, that cold self-control of his which made the smallest token of emotion so shattering. She did not know why she thought suddenly of an instrument she had been shown in Chingyen, upon which a needle oscillated a little, and she had been told that it represented an earthquake of thousands of miles away, in which perhaps 1,000 persons had lost their lives. She looked at him. He was ghastly pale. She had seen the pallor on him once more, or twice before. He was looking down, a little sideways. Well? She clasped her hands. She knew that if she could say yes, it would mean everything in the world to him. He would believe her. Of course, he would believe her, because he wanted to. And then he would forgive. She knew how deep was his tenderness, and how ready he was, for all his shyness, to express it. She knew that he was not vindictive. He would forgive her if she could but give him an excuse that touched his heart, and he would forgive completely. She could count on him never to throw the past in her teeth. Cruel he might be, cold and morbid, but he was neither mean nor petty. It would alter everything if she said yes. And she had an urgent need for sympathy. The unexpected knowledge that she was with child had overwhelmed her with strange hopes and unforeseen desires. She felt weak, frightened a little, alone and very far from any friends. That morning, though she cared a little for her mother, she had had a sudden craving to be with her. She needed help and consolation. She did not love Walter. She knew that she never could, but at this moment she longed with all her heart for him, to take her in his arms so that she could lay her head on his breast. Clinging to him, she could have cried happily. She wanted him to kiss her, and she wanted to twine her arms around his neck. She began to weep. She had lied so much, and she could lie so easily. What could a lie matter when it could only do good? A lie, a lie. What was a lie? It was so easy to say yes. She saw Walter's eyes melt and his arms outstretched towards her. She couldn't say it. She didn't know why. She just couldn't. All she had gone through during these bitter weeks, Charlie and his unkindness, the cholera, and all those people dying, the nuns. Oddly enough, even the funny, drunken little Waddington, it all seemed to have changed her so that she did not know herself. Though she was so deeply moved, some bystander in her soul seemed to watch her with terror and surprise. She had to tell the truth. It did not seem worth while to lie. Her thoughts wandered strangely. On a sudden she saw the dead beggar at the door of the compound wall. Why should she think of him? She did not sob. The tears streamed down her face, quite easily, with wide eyes. At last she answered the question. He asked her if he had been the child's father. "I don't know," she said. He gave the ghost of a chuckle. It made Kitty shudder. "It's a bit awkward, isn't it?" His answer was characteristic. It was exactly what she would have expected him to say, but it made her heart sink. She wondered if he realized how hard it had been for her to tell the truth. At the same moment she recognized that it had not been in the least hard, but inevitable. And if he gave her the credit for it, her answer, I don't know, hammered away in her head. "I don't know, man. Just don't know." It was impossible now to take it back. She got her handkerchief from her bag and dried her eyes. They did not speak. There was a siphon on the table by her bed, and he got her a glass of water. He brought it to her and held the glass while she drank. She noticed how thin his hand was, and it was a fine hand, slender, with long fingers. But now it was nothing but skin and bones. It trembled a little. He could control his face, but his hand betrayed him. "Don't you mind me crying," she said. "It's nothing really. It's only that I cannot help the water running out of my eyes." Damn water running out of my eyes! Need a better damn faucet. Keeps leaking out of my damn eyes, this fucking water. This story is fishy. It's like I wrote it or something. Fishy. Turn those eye faucets off. She drank the water and put the glass back. Well, that's the reason. She's putting more water in and the eye faucets are not working properly. He sat down on the chair and lit a cigarette. He gave a little sigh. Once more or twice before she had heard him sigh like that, and it always gave her a catch at the heart. Looking at him now, for he was starting with abstracted gaze out of the window, she was surprised that she had not noticed before how terribly thin he had grown during the last weeks. His temples were shrunken, and the bones of his face showed through the skin. His clothes hung on him loosely, as though they had been made for a larger man, though his sunburned face had a greenish pallor. He looked exhausted. He was working too hard, sleeping little and eating nothing. In her own grief and perturbation, she found room to pity him. It was cruel to think that she could do nothing for him. He put his hand over his forehead and thought his head were aching. She had a feeling that in his brain too those words hammered madly. I don't know. I don't know. It was strange that this moody, cold and shy man should have such a natural affection for little babies. Most men didn't care much, even for their own, but the nuns, touched and a little amused, had more than once spoken of it. If he felt like that about those funny little Chinese babies, what would he have felt for his own? Little funny Chinese babies. Kitty bit her lips in order to prevent herself from crying again. He looked at his watch. I'm afraid I must go back to the city. I have a great deal to do today. Shall you be all right? Oh yes, don't bother with me. I think you'd better not wait for me this evening. I may be very late, and I'll get something to eat from the Colonel Yu. Very well. He rose. If I were you, I shouldn't try to do anything today. You'd better take it easy. If there is anything you want before I go? No thanks, I shall be quite all right. He paused for an instant as though he were undecided, and then abruptly, and without looking at her, took his hat and walked out of the room. She held him so through the compound. She felt terribly alone. There was no need for self-restraint now, and she gave herself up to a passion of tears. A passion of tears. And with that, I can surmise that the reading session is over. Thank you for stopping by. Look at that ocean art. The people in the boats. The boat wash. Right. Anywho, break time.